BM, hello, and furthermore, Ooga Booga.
Hello.
We have we have some technical issues, a little bit delayed. It will be difficult, but we will try our best. Welcome to this live stream. I'm your host today. My name is Mo Kush, and I usually do my podcasts in Hungarian. But today I'm thrilled to introduce a special guest, Jenny from the Honey Jar. For those who don't know, the Honey Jar is an incubator project, a venture studio with a lot of partners and one of the biggest validators on Berachain. Hello, Jenny. How are you?
Hello. Pretty good. Let's see how we go with this delay. It could get punishing, but I'm a big fan of chaos, so I think we can make it work.
Yeah. So it's not that bad. Before we begin, I have to mention that nothing that we say is financial advice. We're just two degens having some unconventional conversations. This live stream is being recorded and you can rewatch it here on X or on YouTube. I'm not a native English speaker, so bear with me. I repeat, that was a joke. Bear with me. Now, let's dive into the conversation. Jenny, today I want to talk with you about Appiology DAO. What is it? Can you explain it to us?
Before we jump in, thanks for having me. If we were talking in Hungarian, it would be a very short conversation. My Hungarian sucks. But before we jump in, who is your normal
sorry for the interruption.
audience?
Did you know that your name, Jenny, is a common name in Hungary?
There you go.
It's like
maybe
it's like John. Jenny is like John. So in Hungarian you say Jani, and everybody knows what Jani the name is.
The spirit of the identity. It's nice that the translation is John, because a lot of the spirit of behind Jenny is kind of around anonymity, keeping things kind of at a common level in this sense. So having a name like John, it would be like calling Jenny John Smith in the UK or something like this.
Yes.
But hey, before we go in,
you have multiple personalities. So one of them will be Jani in a Hungarian one.
Love it. We're going to work with that. So what's your audience like? Who are the normal people who check into your show or engage? Like, are they? I noticed that your avatar is a lit pudgy penguin. Is it Penguin Crew? Is it NFT Crew? Is it DeFi Degens? Is it new folks, old folks? Like, do you have much feeling for that?
Yeah, I usually do videos for YouTube in Hungarian, and there's a bigger Hungarian community, and we have a smaller community. We are talking about NFTs and DeFi. We have a subscription model, and there we have podcast, and we talk about 6 hours. So you would like it. And the last 1 or 2 hours in the last couple of weeks, we always talk about Berachain, what's happening there, and what to do there, what's exciting happening there. So yeah, Berachain is actually a big part of our daily business. So we are a lot of folks here in Hungary where we are deep in the trenches, and yeah, it's very exciting.
Okay, fellow travelers. Hello, fellow degens. Sorry for your loss. A lot of us have been spending a lot of time on Berachain, especially the V2 testnet, the V1 with the mempool, the kind of carrying capacity of the underlying building blocks really got stretched to their absolute limits. So V1 was a kind of a trauma bonding experience for many of us. But during that process, despite that, we had an influx of many new bears. And V2, what we found is a lot of us are spending, in terms of hours per day, more time fucking around in Berachain than actually most other places on chain, let alone a testnet. We're talking mainnet. I guess you could compare it in some cases to being in the trenches over on Solana in terms of time put down. But certainly from the conversations that we've been having in the community server on Twitter and this type of thing, people seem to be having fun fucking around in Berachain. And so, yeah, I guess your question, let's dive then deep, just straight into Apiology DAO. So at a high level, it's an entity which has a large stake of governance power in partner protocols. And it will have a collection of holders. We call them seat holders. And those seat holders will be the beneficiary of the financial flows running through the treasury. But they'll also be the operators of the treasury within kind of governance bounded boundaries. And so Apiology DAO kind of emerged from an observation that I had as a whale in the ecosystem, and having been in crypto for as long as I've been. I'm many cycles in by this point. I've been full-time since the end of 2013. And one of the common dynamics is that when a builder builds something, they need different layers of liquidity. They need user liquidity, so that's people spending time, attention, and maybe funds. They need liquidity, so LPs, liquidity providers, to kind of ensure that there is sufficient TVL for the TTD, for the things to do. And then they also need kind of user feedback, like ideally from people who are power users, be it devs, hardcore degens, and this type of thing. Without those three elements, and there's more, but those are the main ones to focus on, projects are often dead in the water. Building is hard. It's like 90% pain and then 10% serotonin when stuff works out. But it's really punishing building in a vacuum without kind of a feedback loop from either users or devs integrating and working with your stuff. So over the last few cycles, as a whale in different ecosystems and in and around Bera, I've been kind of full-time Bera since around 2021, since the NFT days. And many of the products that were emerging through the bear market were NFTFi projects. So these were options protocols. They were kind of on-chain swaps. We're talking like SudoSwap or Caviar or Putty options. And people would often come to Jenny. They'd speak with the foundation. They'd say, hey, we've got this cool product. What do you think? And then the foundation, most often Smokey, would say, hey, you need to speak to Jenny. And then Jenny would not just provide liquidity, would also bring users, but then would also use these tools. So Jenny, as an agent of chaos, I often kind of am coming from the persona of multiple split personalities, but also split user personas. And it was my observation that after kind of many years in the trenches of this being a really common pattern of you need to find your LPs, you need to find your users, and you need to find your adopters, it just occurred to me that why do we leave these needs amongst just to the general market? There's a product there. And the outcome of that in the context of Berachain is Apiology DAO. So it gives people who may not themselves be whales an opportunity to participate in a whale-like entity. So from a general holder perspective, they kind of get a slice of the pie of like a bigger actor. Oftentimes when you're a big actor in a space, the deal flow comes to you. You don't need to alpha hunt. The benefit for our partner protocols is when you're working in a distributed system, one of the challenges that you face is to ensure that your tokens are sufficiently distributed, both for governance reasons, but also kind of just general stability of the system. You don't want there to be a concentration of token ownership amongst a few, because it will fuck up the charts. It will fuck up whatever the game dynamics of the system that you've built are. However, it is in your benefit as it's a bit of a contradiction in the sense that when your tokens are really widely distributed and decentralized, the process, especially if you have some mechanisms around governance, the overhead of managing such a heterogeneous group of people, so a real mix of widespread of people, is its own type of work and overhead. Any publicly traded company can kind of, or any let's say drama around these types of entities, a big feature of that is kind of the work involved in trying to coordinate amongst a disparate set of stakeholders who maybe have different incentives and aims and missions. And so for a project, it actually helps to have some whales, but not too many, so that you have a fewer number of people that you can communicate with. I may be saying the quiet part out loud, but this is just the fact of the matter. It's just a feature of capitalism. It's a feature of markets. You don't want too many whales, but you want some who are friendly and cooperative in a particular type of a sense that you can negotiate with in a logical type of a sense. And so for protocols who are partners with us, one of the perks and benefits that they get is that, for example, in some instances, between, let's say, 1 to 5% of a protocol's tokens are going to be diamond poured by Apiology DAO. And they know that as an entity, yes, it's a DAO, but they can kind of reason with the DAO and kind of keep the DAO abreast of changes coming up. So you get the benefit of having a governance partner that you can interact with, but without having the risk of a massive entity that's going to fuck your charts up or dump on you. The benefit for the wider eco is that then a lot of the innovation in and around Berachain is kind of at that financial and interoperable, what we call the fat bearer thesis, the interoperable cooperation between different protocols. And so we essentially create a Lego brick, if you want to think about it in terms of language from DeFi Summer. The way that I think about it is in terms of from more Unix philosophy of keep it simple, stupid, the KISS principle, you do one thing, you do it well. And so Apiology DAO then becomes a interoperable Lego brick, or if you're in cybernetics, it's a plug and play thing, where then if we become a proxy for the partner protocols and the flywheels interconnected with, let's say, between Beradrome, Goldilocks, and Beraboro, we become a Lego brick that you can plug into what you're doing to kind of get the perks associated with the compound interaction between these partner protocols. The perk for a holder is you can be as every holder of the DAO will need to be an active participant to some degree. So it's not kind of a sit back and do nothing thing. It's minimized, but it is important in terms of distributed entities that participants have proactive decisions to make. And then there's a scale there. And we're leveraging some innovations in the intersection of DeFi and NFTs to enable people to access those financial flows on the fly as taking out loans against their seat, which will give them access to their pro rata share of the profit treasury. So I'll stop there. That's kind of like a long, it's a part of the Janitor brand is this kind of long, winding answers. But hopefully, if there's anything there that you want to drill down into more, we can deep dive.
There are a whole lot of stuff, and yeah, it's like a rabbit hole. You go there, and there are 100 different paths where you can go, and there's always something to discover, something new. For example, today I wanted to read about the fat bearer thesis That's why I loved when you said that. And there was an article linked with that, and there were 3 articles about how this Fedbera thesis came to life. And there were like 3 articles with fat thesis, and then the thin, the fat, and I don't know. So you can deep dive into something and then find a path, and then in this path you can deep dive much more. So I think you had a huge part in this work, where I think you wrote a lot of stuff to that. And yeah, I don't know. I have so much questions, and I'm so happy that you're here. But we wanted to keep it a deep dive into one topic. So I will continue to ask you about Apology DAO. What the perks you said already, but maybe you can tell something more about the perks, what you can get. I'm taking notes, and I saw if I want to say an alpha. So if you read everything what's online, so these articles, you can visit the Honeyjar Twitter account, the oxhoneyjar.xyz. And if you read all that stuff, you will get a very good picture about the whole stuff, and you will see this makes a lot of sense. So I won't say nothing new, but I saw you have a lot of partners, as you said. Can you say something more specific about those partners and what exactly the deal is?
So if you, yeah, we've a team of us have been building every day, probably beyond full-time hours. For Gianni, it's been since a lot of the work that we've been doing has been building on. We've been 100% focused on Berachain since before, since it was. We understood there was a chain coming from the NFTs. So for Gianni, because of the position I'm in, because the markets were the way they were in 2021, I just decided during bear markets, it's my strategy to build. You shift from speculation zone, proactive in the markets, through to build mode. That's building is the most sustainable way of getting serotonin, if that's the way, and dopamine, if that's the way your brain is wired. A feature of bear markets is you can often, in the thin books and the PVP, you can get kind of chopped to shit, and your portfolio can get really hammered. So it's been my observation in the last 3 or 4 cycles that you shift 100% into builder mode. In that process, you identify other builders and you build relationships with people. During a less quiet time, a less noisy time, I should say. There isn't so much noise, the signal is higher. So I bring this up because before we started the Honeyjar, a lot of work was done trying to understand what the implications of proof of liquidity were for the design of systems. And so the Honeyjar was built on the top of a lot of public thinking and learning and education pieces and writing and getting into arguments with other builders and really nerding out and going super deep on this ship before there was technical documentation, before there was a testnet, even just thinking about it in the open in a type of a sense. And I know I wouldn't be surprised if aspects of those learning and thinking in the open fed back into the foundation and the devs and this type of thing. I mentioned that feature earlier of when you're building, it can be quite an isolating, alienating experience. A lot of dev can be challenging and unforgiving. And so having a group of active people engage with your stuff as you're doing it is actually immensely valuable. And I think we can see this kind of feedback mechanism in the fact that even if you go to the foundation blog, there's an article about the Fat Bearer thesis, or the head of ecosystem, Captain Jack Bearer, when talking about this stuff, fully uses these metaphors and kind of naming conventions, which shows the way in which, and it's one of the things that has kept many builders in the ecosystem waiting around for mainnet to launch, is the fact that a lot of people in the foundation and on the team, they're also kind of connected to the trenches still. They're observing what we're doing, how we're experimenting with stuff, and the learnings and ways of describing things and framings feeds back into the foundation. And so, yeah, in terms of things to do, there's a lot of things to do in the Bera Eco, because you've got, let's say, 1,000 devs and content producers over that number of time, like pouring all of their creative efforts into this ecosystem. So now, as game time is starting to approach, you start folding back the layers, and you realize there's hundreds of layers, and each of those layers intersects with someone else's other layers. So it really is, it's the best computer game I've come across recently, in that sense, that has some potential for financial outcomes. So that's a long way of saying that there's a number of different partnerships with Apiology DAO. Some of them I used to be quite strict about on the Twitter for THJ, so that's OX Honeyjar. If you go into the highlights, I think that highlights tab, you will see deal sheets. So that we kind of, I think we're one of the first in the ecosystem to really define what is this partnership, like what's the deal. So we call them deal sheets, and I'm big into the origins of trade and the early emergence of capitalism, the emergence of the printing press, of these types of like double entry accounting, the Venetian method, all of these different things. And so oftentimes stuff comes down to this act of, if we were in person, we would write this out on a piece of paper, we would both go away, we would review, we would iterate, and then once we get to a form that we're happy with, we would both sign this with a witness. And so those deal sheets, actually, they're quite esoteric in that sense of us as agents and you as agents, we sign this document with our publicly identified keys. The witness isn't a person, it's the blockchain, which is don't trust, verify. Anyone can kind of go to Arweave, I think it's Arweave, and kind of check the deals of that term. And if we deviate from the deals of these terms, they either need to be renegotiated or teams, and we should hold each other to account. A lot of the metaphors and learnings that we take from this is kind of, yeah, the emergence of early mercantile capitalism and the ability to transact and create agreements across vast new terrains. Now, this isn't me being an apologist for all of the bad stuff that comes with kind of global expansionist kind of imperialism and or trade, but I think there are metaphors that we can learn from the mechanisms and tools in this new terrain that we find ourselves in, because it's an unfolding ocean of opportunity. But we can learn from the old ways in terms of best practices, but then we can bring it into the contemporary moment using all of this cybernetics, cypherpunk tools that we have at our disposal. But really it boils down to something very simple, is I have a pen and someone else somewhere else on the globe has a pen, and we've got a form of paper, and we're able to make the same type of groundbreaking, massive, if you think about the impacts of the East India Company, it was a very tiny company based out of a tiny office in London that changed the entire history of the globe. But so much of these systems have been managed just with pen and paper and maybe the postal system. Nowadays, we have our public-private keys. We have documents that we can turn into PDFs, put onto a blockchain. We've got the internet. So Apiology DAO, you can kind of think about it as a organization that's in that lineage of entities. In terms of the deal sheets, we should make them all easy. After this conversation, I'm going to go away and create a simple repo that we can have linked on the website, just so that people don't have to hunt around. But those deal sheets have all been communicated primarily through Twitter. We use that as the main fire hose. And those deals range from, in some instances, partners want to specifically drop the tokens to Apology seats. In other instances, partners want to drop to the entire Honeycomb holder base, which is by this point, let's say 5,500 holders, so more than Milady, more than Pudgy Penguins. We're one of the most widely distributed NFTs in Web3 that are, let's say, operational. However, if a project drops to nakedly just to all Honeycomb, Apology DAO holds about 40% of Honeycomb. So whether they've made a direct deal with Apology DAO or the wider Honeycomb holders in general, Apology DAO through all of these drops or perks becomes a kind of, as the largest holder of Honeycomb, becomes the largest actor in the Bera eco for pretty much all of these protocols. At this point, we've got about between, let's say, 40 and 60 partnerships that have some type of material exchange lined up for when Berachain launches. We've already received airdrops from Layer Zero, from Plug, from Dyad, from Sweeper. I'm forgetting some in there as well, from Unicorn. So already outside of the Bera eco, blue chips and other big projects are seeing this as a strategic and effective way of achieving that aim of distributing their tokens amongst proactive on-chain degens. So a big challenge for projects is, how do we identify agents and actors on-chain who are going to be beneficial for the benefit of the protocol? That's the challenge that projects have. The product of Honeycomb that we've created, I think, is we've productized the community. From Web3, we're kind of allergic to this description that, oh shit, you're the product. But the problem isn't being a product. The problem is, do you have the power and agency to see the benefit from being the product and to impact change on the product itself? So in Web2, we're productized, but then the profits are privatized. And then you're essentially sold off to the highest bidder. Honeycomb as a product is a productized community, but when a drop happens to Honeycomb, who are the beneficiaries?
You mean holders?
It's the holders. So in this type of a sense, we've flipped some of the power dynamic problems. Not Honeycomb holders. And Apology DAO you can think of as basically Honeycomb on steroids, because there are benefits to being able to being able to coordinate, is what it comes down to. So much of this stuff is coordination games. And entities, whether it's if they're individuals with large holdings and a large stake, or whether it's cabals, the yield and the value emerges from the ability to coordinate, if you boil it down to its essence. And so you can think of Apology DAO as coordination software for the new frontier that we're on, in terms of this vast ocean of actionable potential. It just happens to be kind of in the digital, inverted commas. But trade is a technology of communication. And so really the limits for where we can take this is just the limits for how we can communicate and how we can coordinate.
And do you have specific suggestions how, I mean, DAOs, if you look at other DAOs, I don't have some DAOs in mind where this coordination works very well. One exception, and this is the DAO of Jupiter, because the incentives are so good that if you miss a vote, that you will be very angry, because there's a lot of incentives. And other DAOs I see mostly failing. There was this Nouns DAO where they come through that you can basically get your ETH back. Or there were other DAOs where I remember this lending protocol where you had a rare CryptoPunk, and I don't know if you're familiar with the story, where a
It's
rare
so good. Yeah.
yeah, and it was fractionized, and someone made a proposal and it went through. So he get basically a 500 ETH CryptoPunk for basically 10 ETH, I guess. So
heroic.
Do you have something in mind how you gonna incentivize that everybody's taking part in DAOs?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you aren't an active participant in this stuff, you're not getting paid out from the thing. So there's a strong alignment there. In terms of, let's start with Nouns DAO. So actually, it's interesting that you bring them up, because we've forked their auction mechanism. I'll come back to that because that's not the question right now. Many DAOs, historically speaking, if you study the form and emergence of different organizational forms from the traditional world, let's say, there's a step which many of these kind of early proto-experiments in organizations miss. And that is essentially what is the collective articles of association here? Like, what's the mission for us coming together? What are the what are the different governance frameworks or different things for, like, do we have alignment or not? What's the mission here? This type of thing. And so whilst on-chain and internet and this type of thing make it easy, very easy for a very wide set of stakeholders to enter into a very loose type of organization or entity shape, they've typically been, let's say, kindergarten level in terms of the technological application of just standard practices, which allow people to coordinate across difference. So the thing that Apiology DAO is doing different right off the back, I think, is we're pulling from a subset of the gens who have been kind of hyper-focused in the Bearer eco for quite some time. So already there's more alignment in terms of the proactive kind of active engagement that people have needed. And to be straight up with you, within the DAO, there will be guardrails in terms of we're taking the best practices from other DAOs, in the sense of it's not a free-for-all. There's going to be dedicated specialized units which are kind of enshrined in through the governance mechanism, which have enshrined powers to operate in a particular type of a way. And THJ will be operating as kind of a, let's say, point of last guard initially. Like, it's not going to be completely free-for-all straight off the back. I believe in the importance of gradual and eventual decentralization. But we're going to be, the important thing always in these things is that people have a meaningful way to exit. If they don't agree with the system's rules and this type of thing, and you can do that by providing a forking mechanism, or you can allowing people to have a rage quit mechanism. And so in the first instance, the rage quit is going to be there from day one, so no one's trapped. But eventually it would be the vision, at least from Jenny's perspective as it is now, important for the ability for folks to be able to fork the entity if they so wish. Like, I don't believe in coercion or keeping people where they don't want to be. I think a lot of people underestimate the complication in managing these types of things. But of course, these different types of systems, when you implement them, you need to also you need to kind of Iron Man them for, let's say, adversarial actors who want to raid and this type of thing. And so that will be rolled out kind of carefully. In the first instance, those specialized subunits who will have kind of scoped powers in, let's say, particular directions, be it kind of deployment of treasury assets into Verify and this type of thing. The process to get into those will be quite stringent. And the, let's say, check and balance to that power is that THJ as a dedicated unit will be operating within Apiology DAOs. Let's say the name we give it is the beekeeper role. So the beekeeper role is there as like a safeguarding mechanism to just ensure that the powers enshrined to each of the dedicated subunits is operating within the bounds of like the spirit of the agreement and the specific terms of the agreement. Have I missed anything? I think that answers your question. I agree. Generally bearish DAOs, like unless, to be honest, I don't even think about it in terms of that language of DAOs. I'm more coming at it from like, how do you achieve the impact of a corporation? Because corporations as a form have shown themselves to be very impactful in world trade. And so what can you learn from best practices there in a digital form? And I think DAOs is quite an umbrella term, and it can mean a lot of different things. But I think broadly speaking, at its heart, the reason we've used this name of DAO is that I do think that eventual decentralization and sufficient distribution of governance power is the most based outcome. And it's the most kind of keeping with the times. Like, this is where we're headed. And most new technologies, if you think about corporations as a technological form, they've had a lot of time for trial and error. They've had a lot of time for making mistakes and this type of thing. And this stuff is going to take time. We're only however many years into DAOs as an experimental form. In crypto, we're only 16 years deep, or however many years it is. Normally it takes like 30 to 40 years for stuff to really break through and become mature. I'm very much, I live in the future, but also now. So kind of I'm making every move now as if the future has come to be already. And then just working backwards from what are the small incremental steps that we need to make now to make that future possible. And then the job is always just to keep forecasting as far as your brain can take you into as many east, north, south, west potential outcomes, because a lot of stuff is out of our control, right? So ideally, you don't want to be completely cucking yourself into one very opinionated kind of directional bet on how the future will be. This is part of, to be honest, why THJ is the shape it is we're building north, south, east, west tech in every direction at every juncture point. So for example, we started working on a meme coin about a year ago, and meme coins back then, they were looked down on, let's say. But we took the opinion that this was one of the things that captured attention each cycle. And it wouldn't surprise us if we have a renaissance or that is one of the directions. We've also got a whole suite of DeFi products, NFT-fi products, NFTs, validator tech, validator as a service, because it's unclear like where the future is going, but you want to be ready when it arrives. And then the last thing I'll say is Berachain as a canvas for these types of experiments. It's the first L1 that I have been involved in where I felt like it was extendable and adaptable enough to be able to accommodate a builder like Gianni, someone who's willing to build in 12 different directions at once. And I get the sense that as a technological base, it could accommodate anything that Gianni can imagine. That I haven't yet imagined something where I'm like, oh, this isn't a good fit for Berachain.
I want to take the conversation a little bit of how can someone get into the Apiology DAO with you mentioned those seeds, and how can someone get one of these seeds?
So the fundraising mechanism for Apiology DAO, we're not accepting money. We will accept NFTs. And so the way to enter Apiology DAO is to get one honeycomb, one Gen 1 honey jar, one Gen 2 honey jar, all the way up to Gen 6. The reason for that number is the honeycomb shape. You'll often see this kind of number of 7. So it's that shape of the honeycomb is repeated throughout a lot of the different things that we do, because it's that honeycomb structure. Once you have got one of each of those things, there'll be the chance to trade that set into the DAO. And in exchange for that, you will receive a seat. Those jars and honeycomb aren't burnt, but you won't be able to recover them again. It's a one-way exchange. And then the DAO takes ownership for those jars, for those honeycomb. So that will be how you can enter into the DAO. Honey jars Gen 5 and 6 have not yet been released, but they're on the way. The only way that you'll have access to the first gate of minting for jar 5 and 6 is if your wallet already holds honeycomb and honey jars 1, 2, 3, and 4, because we're trying our best to enable people who've been actively preparing for Apiology DAO to be the ones who are prioritized in terms of the possibility to mint those final 2 jars. Because as each jar has been released, the quantity, the number of NFTs has been decreasing. The meme math there is, if you add up honeycomb and all of the jars, the number is, can you guess it? 69,420. Meme mathematics is an important part of the bearer religion. So yeah, there's a lot of other games involved in the jars that we could go into. For example, when a jar ferments, once they're all minted out, the contents of the jar treasury will be distributed to people. Sometimes it's winner takes all. Sometimes it's there's different phases where the contents of the jar treasury get distributed to particular NFT holders. So there's a lot of layers to jars themselves. But yeah, does that answer? That's some people are already in the DAO. So during the bear market, THJ acquired Mijani DAO. That's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. But around 2,000 of the seats have already been pre-allocated to holders from Mijani DAO and from the partner deals, the deal sheets that we've got going with. So in exchange for tokens from partner protocols, some number of seats in some instances were traded.
So how many seats are for sale? For you mentioned if you have honeycomb and honey jar 1 to 4, you will basically be able to mint honey jar 5 and 6, and if you have them all, you can exchange it for a seat. So if I have, for example, honeycomb and honey jar 1, 2, 3, 4, is it guaranteed that I can mint honey jar 5 and 6?
So no, in the sense that the supply of each jar, it started high and it's been going lower and lower. And given that jar 6 will be the rarest, there isn't a jar for every jar 5, or there's not a jar 5 for every jar 4. So it's not guaranteed. So there is going to be some competition there, even for people who are but it's not going to be a first come first served wide list bloodbath, but it will be bloody. It will be a boxing match instead of a medieval battle with swords and cannons and this type of thing.
Yeah, I find it's kind of amazing that it's only a test net. Nobody's speaking about a better chain. So yeah, there are these, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, maybe 5,000 people who are deep into the trenches, but it's not that hype like we saw with Blast or other farming layer 1s or layer 2s. And we see NFTs and like the honeycomb is at 0.4 ETH, and if you add up to somebody who wants to get a seat it's maybe, I don't know, 0.6, 0.7, and needs to mint Honeyjar 5 and 6. So I find it fascinating that already in a testnet phase, there are so much demand for these seeds. I don't know how which topic we can proceed. Maybe
we could talk about
get into
so you mentioned the limits to the DAO. So what you've just mentioned is really true. But we haven't seen something like Berachain before, where you can already identify a wide set of interested users. So we're a data-driven cult. We run the second largest Dune data studio on Dune. Pretty much bears, whenever they turn their attention to a platform, become one of the biggest, if not the biggest, users. So for example, the articles that you mentioned, I bring this up a lot, but it kind of surprises people. More than 35% of all funds that have run through the Mirror platform are those Honeyjar articles. 35%. If you look at Zora, the free mint meta that we've been kind of steering from off Apiculture Jar, which is our war room, you can see, like, in terms of just raw numbers and funds raised, we're kind of up there in some of the top entities for their entire product across an entire blockchains. If you look at Arbitrum, all of the many collections that have minted by different bearer projects, bearer projects often make up some high percentage of the top 10 to 20 active projects in these ecosystems. This is the similar on Base, Optimism, Arbitrum, Zora, and different particular services. A lot of chains are going to get a lot more quiet once Berachain launches, because Berachain is the destination chain. But what's interesting here is that compared to many L1s, is a community has built itself whilst waiting for Berachain, and we haven't seen an L1 launch into an established community that is very particularly waiting for that particular L1. We simply haven't seen this before. The nearest analogy, I think back to when Ethereum was being built, pre-launch between the ICO and this type of thing. And the only game that people really had in town was Bitcoin, some color coin experimentation, some P2P experimentation, forks of Bitcoin in particular types of direction. It was a very spiritually pure time. It was a very kind of high degree of earnest experimenters and geeks and this type of thing. It was, I look back at those times fondly. When Ethereum launched, we didn't have any tooling. We didn't have shit, but it launched into a very proactive and waiting group of people. And the spread of things to do wasn't as wide. So there was less attention at the time, but it was in a more concentrated way focused. But there simply wasn't things to do. It was kind of the Stone Age of blockchain. Now, with all of the tooling that we've got, with the kind of social and cultural and societal shifts that we've had in the meantime, we simply haven't had an L1 that's launched into a context where things are as progressed, and things can always get better, but they're way better than they were back then, with a community of people and a culture which is quite cult-like. But I'd say more than the cult, it's actually a proactive culture. It's the reason I think cults are bound. They have limits to growth. Cultures are technologies of converting people into tastes and persuasions and things. It's much more sustainable as an intake and outtake. It's hasn't got as many bounds to where it can grow. So I disagree with Murad here. He puts cults above culture, and I actually think it's the inverse. I think cults which develop culture can actually grow to be much bigger than those bounds. And the thing is that if you track the on-chain stuff, there's actually about 74,000 wallets that have spent money on a Berachain NFT. That's unique wallets. The interesting thing for us is data analysts and kind of cypherpunks who are very data driven is the NFT accelerationism that we've experienced in Berachain. You can think of it, if you're into databases or games, you can think of it as checkpoints through time for the state of the game at a moment in time. And so what that allows us as builders to do is we can, in a really granular way, identify which subsets of people did this and this. Like, okay, we're in the Fat Bearer thesis. Which subset of people was interested in Bearaboro, Bearadrome, and Honeyjar at this particular moment in time? Boom, we can find those 10,000 people. For example, I just did a snapshot of the Friendtech keys for each holder of a janitor Friendtech key and each holder of a Charlotte Fang 77 Friendtech key. At 4:20 today, it's 4:20 UTC, that we did a snapshot. And so now we can identify who were the key holders that we're then going to give them a bearer to. But now everyone's dumped on each other. Now I can find out, okay, who are the blind faith believers who got told dump and didn't.
I knew it.
Right? So there are all of these, there are just, for days we can, the data set is so rich, let's put it this way, pre-chain. And so in terms of the things to do, the feeling and the vibe, those of us who can see and read the data, we see it for what it is. And this is way beyond anything that's come in the crypto sector before, hands down. What we're talking about is as vital as the early emergence of, like, let's say, 4chan, of Reddit, of these zones of really Wikipedia in the early days, the Well, if you want to go all the way back, like these dense zones of absolutely astronomical creation and creative spirit, and a breakdown in the normal dyad of producer and consumer. What we're actually seeing is a breakdown in that kind of restrictive dyad, and we've got a culture of producers. Whatever your stakeholder position is, everyone who's in the Bearer eco currently pre-chain is a hunter. Like, they're hunting for like how to get edge. And I'll say this: it would be, many people are making the mistake of feeling they arrived to Berachain, it's way more mature than most other launched L1s, and they're getting a feeling of regret and feeling like they're late. And that's a mistake, because the chain hasn't even launched. Can you imagine someone being like, oh yeah, I was around before Ethereum launched, but it was too late? Like, you'd laugh in the, like, we sometimes get sucked into false narratives that kind of restrict our movement. And I'd hope more of us just take a step back and say, any of us involved in the first year of Berachain are so well positioned to find some way in which we can take a position. And I agree with Murad in this sense of, like, don't trade yourself to death. Like, believe in something. And there's a lot to believe in Berachain. And belief and those believers in stuff are probably going to outperform people who are very actively trying to trade and this type of thing. I wanted, though, off the back of that, we could talk about Apiology DAO. So it's not a fixed DAO in the sense of it can contract and it can expand. And so we forked the Nouns DAO auction contracts, and the DAO will grow by 1 seat, circulating seat. This is the important caveat: 1 circulating seat per day. So there's a queue, and only 1 per day will be sold. If someone in the DAO wants to leave, then essentially they can take out a loan or they can enter the exit queue. And I think the exit queue is first in, first out, or it might be random. I'm forgetting that detail. And if there are seats in the exit queue, then the auction house will take one of those seats, and then it will auction it like a Nouns. like Noun's DAO does, and the funds go to the highest bidder, and those funds go to the person who's exiting the DAO. However, if someone wants to rage quit, they can just take a loan out against their seat for a pretty high LTV, and then they can just default on the loan. So that's how you kind of skip the queue, but you skip out on the potential premium. If we're in a bull period and there's maximum belief in what the DAO is doing. So an example of this is we've actually stealth launched Apiology DAO on testnet, so it's live, and no one is selling their seat. So all holders are no one's entered the exit queue, and so in that scenario we can say, okay, this is a very bullish period, people want in, and so the DAO will mint a new seat. And the proceeds of the sale on the Noun's auction then go to the liquid backing of the seat. So for each new sale, all existing members of the DAO, see the direct benefit of being in this thing, which is extremely exclusive to get in and in demand. And then during periods where there's less faith, people want to cash out or they want to leave, the DAO doesn't grow anymore in terms of its total raw number of seats, because the seats will be recirculated from the exit queue. And so again, this is we're a part of nature, whilst we sometimes forget that. And so it's important to think in terms of natural dynamics, such as the ability to expand and contract. Anything which can only expand, we have a name for that, it's cancer or something like that. Stuff which can't grow or contract, we have another name for that, and it's normally something that's dead or kind of inert. So yeah, that's a deep dive. Thank you, by the way, for just sticking on one topic. We've got like around 20 different deep products that we could talk about in this level of depth. And I appreciate you just sticking to one, because it allows us to go way deeper than if we tried to do a high level of, let's say, 10 things.
Yeah. Yes, as I said, if you dive deep into one topic, there are in this topic a lot of stuff where you can deep dive more. And yeah, I wanted something to express that we have seen a lot of L1s and L2s launching this year. So for example, Starknet, Manta, ZK Sync, recently Scroll. So there are a lot of folks who watching this and can't make a difference between Berachain and other L1s, other L2s. And you said it, I think, very well, that the main difference is that you are building for 3 years now. You have a community. You have a community which was organically growing, not incentivized, maybe a little bit in hope for an airdrop. But I think it's very well thought out that you track the NFT holders as a proxy for real users. And yeah, I've got two questions. One with this Friend.tech keys. I found it very fascinated at what you said. I hoped that you will say something similar, because you have to read between the lines. So you said there is nothing, how did you express that? Nothing confirmed use for the keys after the snapshot. So a lot of people dumped. And now you said, so you can track here who's got really big conviction and who are those who are only in for quick trades. Can you say something more about that? So are there any plans for your Friend.tech keys? Or
so
yeah,
I'll start from let's start from what problem are different people trying to solve? technology producers of protocols and projects are trying to identify who are the people who are going to have high conviction and they're in it. And so the question in itself is a bit, how do you prove a negative? You kind of can't. I can't prove I'm not gonna dump, or I can't prove something in the future necessarily, but it's much easier to identify what is this person's past behavior when in the absence of any, let's say, incentive. An example of this, for example, is the Yeetards, the Eat, Sleep, Yeet protocol. Nearly coming up to 22% of their supply, 22% has been sent to a burn address. Why? For just people being idiots. But that also shows, for example, we've got a tool called Bear Drops, which is beardrops.0x honeyjar.xyz, where we are making it easy for projects to identify these subgroups within groups. So, for example, if you want to find out who are the people who burnt their NFT with absolutely no security that something good would come from it, now any project in the Berachain ecosystem can target that subset of people. We're going to add who are the people who, let's call it Mabera Blind Faith or Friendtech Blind Faith group subset. We'll now make that subset of people easy for any project in a distributed way to target. So the question isn't, can you give us some assurances about what the plans are? You need to turn the mirror back on yourself, and you need to say, how can I show that I'm, like, if people are looking for a quick trade, don't worry about, there's so much in the Bera eco. If you just spend a little bit of time, you're going to figure out mechanism after mechanism after mechanism to get a 2x. We've been doing this for years. Like the Berachain eco community, we've been over here having like hilarious fun for years, all through the bear. Like there's been so many games, so many ways of making like little like quick flips and this type of thing. But all you need is time and attention. However, if you're someone who you're in, like you are fully in, the challenge for you is to then, there's a lot of opportunities for you to just demonstrate on chain. This isn't kind of a monad type of a play where you need to check into a Telegram with a certain frequency and do a retweet somewhere with a certain set of regularity. It's more permissionless than that. Like, do stuff on chain that shows your conviction. And in the Berachain eco, there's a lot of way of showing your conviction. And it's Gianni's practice and thesis that that is the secret sauce in this ecosystem, is projects in a decentralized, permissionless way are able to identify a growing number of people who are clearly sticky users, let's put it that way. The last thing I'll say on this is, maybe it's not clear, but Gianni's just a community member. THJ is totally organically emerged from the community, have never received payment from Berachain, except I was a very big holder of bears, and those bears rebased. So it's not commonly known, but all of the money that Gianni has spent creating the honey jar was made by just selling some of those rebases of bears. Yeah, I've made it in other cycles. For me, this is much more a how do you put it, legacy piece. It's not about the money for me. It's about how far can we creatively push this? Like, how far can you take this? What's the legacy that can be left behind? But there's a growing number of builders once they have arrived into the Berachain eco. And I raise this, and it's differentiated from other ecosystems that I've been involved in, who incentivize with grants, who incentivize with promises of airdrop, who incentivize with other stuff. And I can tell you that most of the builders that I've spoken to who've arrived to Berachain and haven't left, most builders who arrive don't leave, the vast majority. They're in it because the tech, and what it enables them to do is the differentiating factor. The people have conviction and they want to build what they want to build, and they don't know anywhere else that will enable what they want to build to the fullest vision other than the canvas of Berachain. The motivation isn't airdrop. The motivation isn't a grant. There is no grants program. There's very little in the way of the Berachain Foundation trying to get people to come to them. And there's a really large number of us builders who have made it in previous cycles, and we're purely building because we love building, and we're in the Berachain ecosystem. In terms of, yeah, so if you're new to the eco, my tip to you is go and try the testnet and spend time in whatever project appeals to you, then go and hang out in their community and get onboarded by them. There is no one way of being Berapilled to get onboarded into Berachain. There's now there's going to be hundreds of projects on Berachain. There's probably going to be like 100 on day one, or let's say in the first week. So there is no one way to engage with this ecosystem. And each of them is a different entry point. Yeah, that would be my tip. And I think there's so much to do. The TTD, the things to do, is so high. Anytime there are things to do and the intersections, when you apply your time at those intersections, you will yield alpha. You'll find something actionable, some strategy, some trait. There's so many. All it requires is time and attention, looking at the intersections of how different projects work, or the intersection of different projects. But yeah, to go back to the key, I don't know, I'm not going to promise anything. These events happen, and then afterwards we look back at them, and then we try and understand what the story was there. So we made an announcement. Snapshot date is here. Don't know what's happening afterwards. And yeah, you get this pullback, a retracement in the charts. This is what we call keys moving from weak hands to strong hands. Like if you're in the trading game, weak hand is not a pejorative. Like you're doing your strategy. All of us have our different things. But the Bera eco, I think, is a eco that has so far, over the last few years, really rewarded diamond pause.
Yep. One thing I wanted to mention is to back those other L1s, other L2s. The main difference, I think, is when other L1s or L2s launch, have their TGE, every airdrop farmer and these people who participated in their testnet or mainnet, the TGE is like kind of the end game. So TGE happens, they get probably an airdrop and they sell it and they leave. And with Berachain, I think when the TG is here, I think it's the opposite. Then we'll start this whole thing. And I find it very, very good that I was deep in the trenches also with Blast, and we here in the community had different strategies and tried different apps. And with the start, with the TGE, it kind of destroyed everything. Now I have to explain Berachain is different, and pay attention, and I try to explain why it is different. And I think you, especially in the honey jar, you have a lot of things which will come after mainnet. So you have a lot of meme coins, you have some NFT projects, and also this kind of auction with these seeds. This is something that keeps people there and keeps the excitement there. And not unlike other L1s and L2s which launched and there's nothing happening, in Bera with the launch, it will start the whole mainnet, and a lot of things will happen. So what you expect, how big this will be? So how which kind of people will come? You have maybe some insider information. You have maybe some whales who were deep into the trenches with I don't know, Ohm and Curve and other DeFi protocols. So what you expect when mainnet starts? How many people, or how bigger than now it can get?
So I'll add the caveat. I didn't 100. This is a blessing and a curse of Gianni. When I hyper focus on something, I really truly go all in. So I'm pretty ignorant about exactly how the Blast TGE went down. There's some builders over that, like I'm a fan of.
But you could
some
learn
builders
from
over there building
mistakes.
stuff. But so I'm a bit unaware of exactly how the TGE was rolled out. So just I'll add that kind of note that I'm speaking now from ignorance to a certain degree. The thing with, so I'm not going to say this in terms of a comparison because I'm not informed enough to compare. But what my prediction is that amongst these, let's say 72,000, it's growing each day, of people who've spent money on Berachain eco assets, you can subdivide that group of people in different types of ways if you analyze the data. If I had to, I would say there's between 10 and 20,000 unique wallets on chain, which show a high degree of very committed on-chain behavior over a long period of time. I'd say what I call the diamond poor index on that subset between 10 and 20,000 is a lot. The liquidity event for a set of people who are with as much conviction as what they have, that's actually a lot of people, like 10 to 20,000 in an early emergent L1. And it's in my impression, in my feeling, it's enough to breathe life into the eco such that, yes, of course, there's going to be a lot of mercenary airdrop hunters who will get some slice of the pie by mimicking the behavior of someone who's got actual conviction. That's fine. That's to be expected. It's good. Airdrop farmers perform really super valuable service to and Sybil farmers, even in stress testing infrastructure. Can the websites handle millions of users? Can the chain itself handle hundreds of millions of transactions? Can protocols themselves manage this? All of that side of stuff, it's valuable, right? But in terms of, I'd say it's valuable in the run up to a chain launching or a product launching, but after the fact, the returns that you get from that type of user activity are diminishing. So I would actually argue, in terms of airdrop farmers, just be real with yourselves about the time that you're spending and the service that you're providing. What is the lifespan of actionable data that projects and protocols can yield from your activity? And maybe expectations that, like, it just doesn't make sense to then give all of your tokens to people who are helping you with only a tiny part of the life cycle of your project. There's we're going to get a lot of hate, whatever we do, in terms of who's getting what. And I think a lot of that is fueled by a lack of realness of people to kind of identify what is the value I'm bringing here. By and far, the hardest work becomes after the thing is launched and the years and years afterwards. And I'd say in the Bera Eco, I'm pretty confident that I'm sandbagging it at 10 to 20,000 very people with a lot of conviction, agents and actors with a lot of conviction. The wealth that will be created for them through this TGE and all of the various TGEs of the 100+ projects launching onto Berachain, it's going to feel pretty euphoric for a lot of people. So it's not just that there's a lot of things to do, it's that people are going to be liquid. And not just that, they'll have been spending a year plus like on chain trying stuff in the eco. The experimentation and strategies that people will be using are going to be much more than just the basic strategies in other ecos. They're going to be quite sophisticated. The interconnected web of financial activity on chain is going to be such that it exhibits the properties of a thriving, complex financial system. And anytime you've got that type of vital life force going on, it's my prediction that it becomes somewhat of a vortex. When you couple that with the mechanism for what I call the fat bearer thesis, the ability for projects and protocols and their users to benefit from the chain level value production. When you couple that with the EVM equivalence, so the overhead of an app switching to Berachain from ETH mainnet is marginal, near zero. When you couple that with all of the things I just mentioned, you create what I think will be a vortex. And it's my prediction that Berachain over the coming period is going to become one of the epicenters of on-chain life. And the way that you start to see that is if you look at the culture production level. You've got things like Steady Teddies, Mebera, Bullers, Beradodge, all of these different things where there's clearly a cult-like, proactive, creative spirit of thousands of people. And that, like, the thing that really lights me up is there's a bootleg culture around these creative zones. So that is these secondary markets where people are creating fake versions of these things, of Steady Teddy or Mebera, and there's a market for those. Like people, creatives, artists, and this type of thing, who can do the style of these yet unlaunched collections, have created a small job for themselves. Now that may seem like a small thing, but the vision that I'm seeing is that essentially I entirely agree with you. I think that you're right. The after game of the chain launching is when the game really starts. I'm going to have to bounce soon, by the way. I've just seen, I don't reveal much about my personal life, but I've just seen two cats kind of like trying to kill each other. So I might go and try and stop them.
Okay. So yeah, you have to go now.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, Jenny, it was a very good conversation. Thank you for accepting my invitation, and thank you for coming up for today's live stream.
Before,
yeah, can't hear you now.
A whole lot of pudgy paraphernalia. Hello?
Oh, you're cutting off now. Now I can hear you.
Can you hear? So you've got a bunch of pudgy penguin stuff behind you. When are we going to get a little bearer up there? And also, I'd love to hear, like, you.
I'm waiting.
You a bit mentioned it, but when did you first find bearer? Like, what was your what was the moment you became more bearer-pilled?
Yeah, it was after Blast. It was in the summer. I think it was in June. I was already active before, but only I wasn't bearer-pilled till that time. And after Blast, I looked into other stuff, which I make videos in YouTube about other stuff. So I found Berachain. I heard, and I think everybody's hearing the same, that Berachain is over-farmed. There are a lot of people who are farming it. And then looking deeper to it, I found out that, as you said, really active wallets who are doing basically useful stuff, there are only a few. So a lot of fake transactions, fake volume is going on. But if you read the articles, if you find out what is Berachain about, proof of liquidity, this three-factor token system. So if you take time and if you understand that, then you kind of start to play around in testnet, and then you can see that there are really few people who understand what this is really about. And then I got Berapit. So I was always a fan of NFTs, meme culture, and basically I had to think about what you said, that people who have strong convictions, I'm always one of them who have too much conviction, so I round trip everything. And maybe for the first time I round trip something good. So it's one of those few things. If you think about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all this kind of stuff, if you hold through, you will probably fine. So, but if you hold the wrong assets, you round trip a lot of stuff. And I'm kind of waiting for being the right project. And if you look at Twitter, I love Steady Teddies, I love this meme culture, and I love Bera. I must admit, I don't really understand 100% how proof of liquidity works and how it will work. I understand the basics, and I understand that it's like a curve model, but on a chain level. So it's very interesting and very exciting. But how this will work out and what will it be after mainnet, I don't know. I'm very excited to see that. And I already have big bags in the Bera ecosystem. So I have a lot of NFTs. I have minted a bunch of articles. So yeah, I'm kind of interested in to see if you really find those people who had really big convictions. So yeah, we'll find out.
Ooga booga. Thanks for sharing that. I think
Ooga booga, yeah.
There's I always love to hear what was people's story, because there's a lot of different ways to approach and enter. But hey, thanks. This was fun.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Thanks for coming up. And for the listeners, go follow Jenny, follow me, follow the Honeyjar, join the Berachain and Honeyjar Discord, and check out all the articles. And Beras can't read, but hopefully you can. So there's a lot of alpha there. Thanks for tuning in. Everyone, have a nice day, have a nice evening. Goodbye and ooga booga.
Ooga booga.
Goodbye.